Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Roger Hall. I am a business psychologist. People say, what is a business psychologist? A business psychologist is the guy who comes to your office and you lay on your own couch. Let me call up my program here. While I'm doing that, why don't you guys all stand up and take a quick stretch because you've been sitting for a little bit. And I'd like all of your attention, so stretch and we'll get started. I'll tell you a quick story as you're stretching about how I got involved with the court systems. I'm grateful to have, and when you're finished stretching, you can sit down. I'm grateful to have gotten involved with the Ohio State Bar Association a little over a decade ago. And it started, I was having lunch with a buddy of mine who's a lawyer. And he had just gotten back from a continuing legal education seminar. And he was rolling his eyes and telling me how awful it was. And he looks at me and he goes, "That was the worst thing I've ever been to. You could do better." Which was not really a vote of confidence, but it started my work with lawyers, and I'm grateful to be here today. I want to talk to you about here we go. Information overload. Information overload is, I believe, one of the major stressors in the lives of people who work in offices. How many of you hear people say, hey, you know, with fewer resources, we don't want you to work harder, we want you to work smarter. Have you guys heard that? Yeah, oh yeah, we just got to work smarter. Well, if you're digging ditches, working smarter does reduce the amount of work you do. But if you're working with your mind, and most of you get paid for thinking, working smarter is working harder. So I want to talk to you about the kinds of errors that we start to make because of too much information. We'll spend a little bit of time today talking about why people resist change, and more in the breakout session or the follow-up workshop. I'm going to get into some of the details. But today I want to kind of lay out the scope of the problem so that you can see that this is really happening to you, and we'll start with just the nature of the problem. So people in your offices say, hey, we want better results. So here's my question. What creates better results? This is the audience participation portion of this morning's. Clear direction, okay? People say, if we want better results, we need clear direction. Or people say, a lot of times I hear people say, we need better behavior. We need to do things differently. So we're going to model the best practices of other people's courts or other people's businesses. We're going to do what other people do. Well, what creates that action and behavior? That doesn't come from nowhere. Better action and behavior comes from better thinking. And all I do all day long is teach people to monitor and manage their thinking. Great athletes, great performers in any endeavor in life are disciplined thinkers. And what I hope to teach you a little bit today is how to manage and monitor your thinking as it relates to taking in too much information. So here's information overload. We're starting to see a body of research that talks about information fatigue syndrome. I love this quote, and I wish I had a name like this, Ashley Brilliant. You know, I such a vanilla name. There's been an alarming increase in the number of things I know nothing about. And if you have young children or middle children, you know they just tell you stuff all the time that you've never heard of. Now, we use the analogy of the computer to understand the brain, but we don't realize that our brains aren't wired to multitask. How many of you have said in the last week, oh, I'm multitasking? I'm multitasking. Yeah, okay, this is where you raise your hands. Okay, this wasn't a rhetorical question, it was an actual question. Okay, so how many of you said it? You say you multitask. Okay, now our brains, and I love brain biology, our brains are actually wired to multitask, and all of you are multitasking right now. Here's how you're doing it. If you can walk and chew gum at the same time, that's two tasks that happen at the same time. If you watch TV and knit, that's multitasking. But here's the important thing. Those activities involve different portions of the brain. Okay? Walking and chewing gum happens in the somatosensory cortex, the parietal lobe. Okay? You got the motor strip over here that makes you do that. Chewing gum, that's probably some brainstem activity because you really don't have to think about it that much. Breathing, most of you are breathing right now. Okay, you're not thinking about that. Your brain is designed to do this. But when you're talking about multitasking, this is what you're talking about. You're sitting at your computer, click it, click it, click it, and the phone rings. And so you pick it up, hey, yeah, click it, click it. And somebody comes to your door, click it, click it. And I'm totally, click, click. And what you think you're doing is you're multitasking. Now, before I go one step further, a lot of you ladies in here are going, oh yeah, well, there's research that shows that women are better at multitasking than men. Hey ladies, we stink at multitasking. We know that. Men, we're like hyped up caffeinated chipmunks. We can't concentrate on anything. Put a TV in the room. I confess, I can't go anywhere with a TV, like a restaurant, they have restaurants now, there's a TV in every restaurant. I can't concentrate there. And then if there's 3, there's always trivia on one of them. And forget it. I'm useless. The way I choose a seat in a restaurant is where can I sit where there's not a television? Because if I'm focusing, drift. Okay, so ladies, you're better than men at this? Of course you're better than men at it. Like, that's something to brag about? So that's not something good. And you're really not that good at it. So here you are. Click it. Yeah. You're doing that. And you think you're multitasking. Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you really think you're getting away with the click, doing the ahs? How many? Okay, listen. I have a PhD in psychology. I got 5 years of graduate training in saying and acting interested. Okay? I am good at this. And so I'm on the phone. My daughter, when she was 5, she's 13 now. When she was 5, I'd be on the phone with her. Click it, and I'm really good at it. And she'd go, what you doing? I go, I'm talking to you. She goes, what else are you doing? Okay? I'm an expert at saying, and if a 5-year-old can catch me, you don't think the people on the other end of the phone recognize your click it? They can hear it. Okay? They know what you're doing. You're answering an email, and you think you can do it all at once. Okay? So here's what's happening. You think you're answering the email, talking on the phone, and you're talking to the person who's coming in, all the while reading your Twitter feed. Okay? How many of you are Twittering right now? Okay, never mind. So there you are, you're doing this. You think you're multitasking. Really what you're doing is single tasking with rapid shifts in attention. You're focused on the email, click, and then you shift to the phone, shift back to the email, shift over to the door, shift back to the phone. Right? Now, let's talk about an experience some of you may have had when you were studying. Do you remember you'd be at the library studying? I'm going to change the example here. You're at the library studying. You get down in the study carrel. You open up your books, and there you are. You start studying, right? And you have a shallow level of concentration at this point. And then you get started, and then somebody like 3 study carrels over goes, and you're like, oh gosh, get some Purell, man. This place is, And so then you get back to work, and then two or 3 study carrels over the other way, somebody goes, and you're, and you can't concentrate, and you get back to work again, and then somebody moves a chair, and you look, and then they're really worth looking at. And so then you get, right? You all know this, right? You have a shallow level of concentration. And when you have this shallow level of concentration, it's easy to get distracted. But then you guys all remember at some point there was this transition time where you dive into a deep level of concentration. And in psychological terms, this is called flow. This is the optimal experience of concentration. A guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi invented this concept. He didn't invent the concept, but he's written about it. And it's in your bibliography. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's Hungarian. He can't help it. His friends call him Mike. So you transition into this deep level of concentration, right? And you know this, where you're focused, you're in the zone, okay? And nothing bothers you. No sound, anything. You lose yourself in this concentration. You guys have experienced this? Some of you are shaking your head, no, you've never experienced this? Now, when you're in the zone, it feels really wonderful. This is a full engagement task, okay? And then at some point, like 2 hours later, you hear something changes, and you snap out of it, and oh, wow. And you realize you've been doing good work for a long period of time. You guys, is this fun when you get this experience? This is one of the chief pieces of happiness in life, is this deep level of concentration, being in the zone, that only occurs when you're working. Okay? It doesn't have to happen at work, but it's a concentrated task that stretches your abilities, where it's fully engaging. And if you experience this, this is fun at work. And one of the key ingredients to lifelong happiness is experiencing being in the zone. Right? Now, it takes some transition time to get there, and then once you're out, you're out. You remember, like, at the end of that, like, you can't get back in the zone again, so you just wrap it up, close your books, and you go home. You guys have experienced this. This is where good thinking occurs. This is where deep concentration and actually getting stuff done occurs at work. And here's what happens when you multitask. You have a shallow level of concentration. You take a quick little dip into the email. You get distracted by the phone call. You're back up at a shallow level of concentration. You take a little dip on the person who comes to your door, and then another person comes, and you never get any deep level of concentration. You get paid to think. Now, there are work products that come from your thinking, but you never get into a deep level of concentration at any time in the day. And yet you think you're productive. No, you're not. You're just frittering all day long. And at the end of the day, you feel awful, don't you? You feel worn out, you feel tired, and you go, where did my day go? There's a great book by a guy named, wait, before I get to data smog, I'll tell you the data smog thing. Great book called Data Smog by David Shank. David Shank says that we now have technology that throws at us information faster than we're able to consume it. That the average person in 16th century England could expect to consume in his or her entire life the amount of written information in one weekday edition of the New York Times. I know this is the USA Today, so it's easier to read than the New York Times, but so what is in this paper, today's weekday edition of the paper, is what the average person in 16th century England could expect to consume in his or her entire life. And you think you have to have it read by breakfast. Now, what people tell me all the time is, oh, we're just different. Our brains evolved. No, it has not. You are believing in the myth of modernity. And the myth of modernity is because we have flush toilets and microwave ovens, we're better than they were. Well, they were very primitive people back then. Oh, come on. Have you read history? How many of you guys know who Pythagoras is? Do you guys know who Pythagoras is? The Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? Well, he was doing mathematical theorizing 2,500 years ago. Did you know that Pythagoras accurately estimated the circumference of the earth within 1,000 miles? He was off by 1,000 miles. He knew it was round. By the way, anybody go, oh, the earth was flat. No, they've known it was round forever. The reason Columbus got it wrong is because he was a bad mathematician. He got the computations wrong. 2,500 years ago, Pythagoras accurately estimated the circumference of the earth based on the angle of a shadow on the inside of a well. What? There was on the equator a well that, on the vernal and autumnal equinox, the sun at noon would shine directly down the well with no shadows. He knew the distance to a well directly north of that well and went to that well at noon on the vernal and the autumnal equinox, and he measured the angle of the shadow on the well there. And based on that was able to compute from the angle on the well the radians that create the circumference of the earth. 2,500 years ago. Now tell me, how many of you could have done that? Tell me that we're smarter than that. No, we're not. We just have microwaves and flush toilets, for which I am very grateful. But we're standing on the shoulders of people who have already thought well. We just have more information. We think we can consume more than they did 500 years ago, but we're thinking less well. We have too much information, the consequences of which are problems in our lives. If you read this, we've got symptoms of data smog. You have increased mistakes. Wait a minute. I thought more information was better. When we talk about at the workshop, we'll talk about why it's not. Increased misunderstanding of others. Increased flawed conclusion. Increased foolish decisions. Increased decisional difficulty. We'll talk about that as well. Sleep disorders. Oh, okay, now we're coming home. How many of you guys wake up at 3 in the morning, can't fall back to sleep? Okay? Impaired concentration. I hear all the time people say to me, Roger, I don't know, maybe I'm getting Alzheimer's. And maybe you are. But what really is probably more likely is that people are having difficulty concentrating and remembering because they have too much information. We've seen the rate of diagnosis of attention deficit disorder go up 5,000% in the last 20 years. That's a lot more kids who are being diagnosed. And there's some current new thinking, and this has not been supported by research, but there's some hypothesizing that some of what we have may be environmentally stimulated attention deficit disorder, that we're putting children in environments with too much information. Now, let me use an example here. How many of you have ever been to Chuck E. Cheese? Okay? How many of you have been to Chuck E. Cheese without a child or a blood oath being involved? One of you. What's wrong with you? Okay? Now, my kids are out of the Chuck E. Cheese phase, but I swore at one point we were never going back to Chuck E. Cheese. Because I have good kids. I have really great kids. I mean, they're wonderful kids. I would take my well-behaved kids into Chuck E. Cheese, and what would happen? They would go, oh, whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole, oh, tickets, oh, the ball pool, oh my gosh, oh, there's a giant, have-a-trail maze for people. This is awesome. And they would, run around, and they would run. And then at the end of the birthday party, oh, a giant singing rat, that's awesome. And so at the end of the birthday party, we'd leave, and they were like these screaming monster children. We'd go to Target afterwards, and they'd be, people would go, he needs to do something about those kids. And so I made a decision, we're not going back to Chuck E. Cheese. And what do we say about our kids when red food coloring I know, okay. Possibly too much sugar, right? Yeah, I know. But what do we say when we take our kids to Chuck E. Cheese? Why do they act so grumpy? Why do they act like screaming monster children? We say they are overstimulated. We have created Chuck E. Cheese in our offices. Okay? There you are, and there's this massive influx of information and stimulation. And guess what? You're grumpy with the people around you, aren't you? Oh, it's driving me crazy. And you can't concentrate, and you're constantly distracted. No wonder at the end of the day you're grumpy. Okay? It's like being at Chuck E. Cheese all day, except without the wonder of the singing rat. So, we have impaired concentration. We have a weakened immune system. We're starting to see physical illnesses that are the result of information overload. 80% of what physicians treat in their offices are stress-related illnesses. How many of you have been to the doctor's office lately and said, Doc, I think I have malaria, beriberi, dengue fever? Anybody? Okay. How many of you... Okay, so let me ask you this question. What's the most common kinds of complaints? What's the most common kind of complaint people go to for the physician? High blood pressure, stress-related illness. Heart disease, stress-related illness. Asthma, stress-related illness. Gastric reflux, stress-related illness. Diabetes, stress-related illness. Ulcerative colitis, stress-related illness. Crohn's disease, stress-related illness. I could go on all day, because 80% of what is treated by physicians are stress-related illnesses, either aggravated by, caused by, or sustained by chronic prolonged stress. If you're taking a prescription medication, very likely it is designed to help you manage the stress in your life. How many of you have a coal mining background? Anybody? What's with these people? When I talk to people in West Virginia, everybody raises their hand. Okay? So, do you guys have heard the concept of the canary in the coal mine? Okay, the canary in the coal mine is before the sensitive oxygen sniffers, the coal miners would go down, they'd take a canary that has a higher metabolism and more sensitive to fluctuations in air quality. And when the canary falls over in the cage, what would people say? They would say, hey, we got to pack up. It's dangerous in here. Let's get out. So they would take the canary up the elevator, get out of the mine, do a little canary CPR. Times were tough. Had to save everything. So then they would go back in. The canary is an early warning signal for the stress in our lives. Your physical illnesses are a warning sign of the stress in your life. And what do? Rather than acknowledge, I need to change something about my life so that this warning signal doesn't pop up, what do? We take medication that alleviates the symptoms without ever alleviating the disease. You're essentially trading out the canary for a bigger bird. It's the condor in the coal mine. Big fella seems fine. We'll just keep on with our lives. Okay? A lot of you feel powerless to solve this problem, so you take medication to alleviate the symptoms without alleviating the problem. We're seeing people get sicker more often as a result of stress. And since most of you have not been chased by a wild animal this week, that's not the stress you're facing. Most of the stress we face is at the workplace, and with knowledge workers, as you are, most of that stress is information related. Indigestion, heart problems, hypertension, and irritability. It isn't that all of your coworkers are idiots. Don't point fingers, okay? But you become more irritable because you're overwhelmed by the information, and you have decreased work productivity. You're not getting as much done because you're trying to consume too much information. How many of you think you don't have enough information at work? None of you. My guess is, based on what I know about court administration and the people I've worked with in the past, you are inundated with information, distraction, and grumpy people. Because a day at the court is like a day of sunshine, isn't it? Okay? Your customers are usually unhappy. This is one of the worst days in their lives. So you're asked to be very patient with grumpy people and overwhelmed with the process of your work. How many of you have said, if it wasn't for the people, this wouldn't be a bad job? You know this. This is the world you live in. So let's talk about why it is. Our society has changed. And our society has accelerated. Now, I'm going to use examples from the grocery store, frankly, because everybody's been to the grocery store and you know it. But this leads to my point. Our society has accelerated. We now use the appearance of having money to get, we use money to give the appearance of having time. We're now buying things that make it look like we have time. I mean, you go to the grocery store, you know this. You buy pre-made pancakes because you don't have time to make the regular pancakes. Okay? You buy brownies that you can microwave because you don't have the time to mix up a pre-made brownie mix with an egg and some milk and bake them, all of which takes 25 minutes. So you just microwave it, which takes 5. We're buying things to make it look like we have money. Now, I don't know what your occupational hazard is, but my occupational hazard is this. I believe God has put everyone on earth here for my entertainment. I love to watch people. And so I go to the grocery store. It's not like people, when I get it back, my family doesn't say, what'd you buy? They say, what happened? Okay, because I'll just, kind of go through and just watch people all day. And so one day I'm going to the grocery store, and my daughter, who's now 13, she was in a car seat at the time. She had fallen asleep. So when a child falls asleep in the car seat, what do you got to do? You got to leave the child in the car seat, because if you take them out, they become that screaming monster child, and then people point. So I'm waiting. I can't leave her in the car because then the SWAT team comes. So there I am. I pull into the parking lot. She's fallen asleep. I'm going to let her sleep. So I get myself a good spot. So I pull in, I pull through, and I'm watching people come in and out of the grocery store. And there's this guy. He's walking out. He's got a cart in front of him and a cart behind him. It's like a cart choo-choo train. And he's walking across the parking lot like this. And he pulls up behind a white SUV. No, it wasn't OJ. And thank you for getting that joke. So he pulls in, he pulls down the tailgate, and he pulls out one of these giant Igloo coolers that he's just bought. He rips the tags off, opens it up, gets 2 bags of ice, pours the 2 bags of ice in there. He gets a bunch of juice boxes that he's bought. He opens the package there, puts the boxes in the ice, closes the lid, pushes it into the back of the SUV. And here's where it gets good. Then he goes to the second cart and pulls out 15 Rubbermaid food storage containers he's just bought, rips the tags off all of them, crumples them up, throws them in there, and then he lays them out smorgasbord style on the tailgate. It's getting good. Okay, I'm like, don't wake up, honey. So I'm watching this, and then he goes back and he pulls out deli containers, stuff he's just bought, opens the deli containers, pours them in to the 15 Rubbermaid food storage containers, throws away the deli containers, closes them up, puts them in. What's he doing? He's going to a picnic. And he's just spent $250 on containers so that it can look like he made it all himself. Right? Now, the reason I tell this story and say a white SUV, because I told the story once and this lady came up to me at the break and said, "Are you following my husband?" No. What color was the SUV? White. Okay, he drives a red SUV. I said, "Why are you asking me this?" She says, "Because I went away for the weekend and I came home and there were 15 brand new Rubbermaid food storage containers." He had gone to the store, done the same thing. Okay, so now we're using money to give the appearance that we have time. We are so accelerated. We're working so fast. And there's an ever-increasing sense of urgency. Everything is an important decision now. So I'm walking down the aisle at the grocery store. I'm on the pickle aisle. You guys have been on the pickle aisle? And there's a guy, and he's doing this thing. This is the man pose at the grocery store. He's in front of the pickles, so I slow down, and suddenly the salad dressing's really interesting to me. And he does the move. You've seen it? He goes, "Hey, babe. Hey, yeah. Hi, yeah. You too. I love you too. Yeah. Salad dressing, super interesting now. Yeah. I'm in front of the pickles. Did you want the kosher dills or the deli dills? Kosher? Got it. You want the big jar or little jar? Okay. Yeah, but okay, so like they got all these, you want whole or slice? Yeah, okay, but see, they got all these different slices. They got like half slice, quarter slice. Yeah, long way, yeah. Then they got the others, like a hamburger slice. Then they got these other long sort of slice hamburger slice. You want a whole? I suppose we could slice them. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Love you. I'm not making this next part up. Call you on aisle 7. Click. Like she's got a map at home. Rounding the corner. Should be getting another call here in a minute. Okay, and so prior to this machine, how would we solve the problem? Okay? I just get these. Okay? And what would you get them home and he gets the deli dills. What? You either eat them or you return them. Okay? But see, what we used to do is we used to actually decide. Now, every decision is an important decision. 40 years ago, who had a cell phone? Brain surgeons, doctor, someone's dying. Someone's having a heart attack. Now, kosher dills are deli dills. Now, because we have the technology, we think every decision is an urgent decision. It used to be you were by yourself, you go, well, let's make the decision. Now, let's consult. Okay? Let's have a meeting. Okay? God so loved the world that he didn't send a committee. Okay? Now we have to have a committee meeting on everything. Okay? And what I know about committee meetings is that if you want a good decision, don't give it to a committee. Okay? Because they'll make a bad decision. They will. They will. And so now we have to consult with everybody because everybody's afraid if I make the wrong decision, it'll come back and get... So we'll diffuse the responsibility by having 8 other people involved in it. What do you think? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now everything's urgent and everything requires a meeting. How many of you go to like 100 stupid meetings a week? And you sit around and you say the same things that one person could decide. But because we have the technology, we have to communicate about it. The third is because we think we can, we think we should. Do you guys remember the days when grocery stores used to close? When there were blue laws and nothing was open on Sunday? In those days, you open the refrigerator at 10 o'clock at night on Saturday night and you go, oh, we're out of milk. What would you say? You'd say, I guess we're having toast for breakfast. Close the door. Go back to your life. 10 o'clock Saturday night, you open the door. We're out of milk. What's the statement you make? What else do we need at the store? And you run up and you buy milk and a couple other things. Okay? That's why they have those tiny little plastic bags now, because they know that most people are going to buy little things. Because we can, we think we should. How many of you, what's the best time to go grocery shopping? 10 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning. I hear this all the time. What should you be doing at 3 o'clock in the morning? Sleeping, exactly. Yeah, but the shelves are filled. There's no one there. The people are so friendly. No, go to bed. Because we can, we think we should. The same is true at your workplace. Because we can, we think we should. You know, before we had this technology, this is a leash that makes you call back. Okay, pagers were just a leash. Okay, this is a leash that makes you call back. Now, you know, it used to be before this technology, and don't get me wrong, I have an iPhone, okay, because I like technology. But this is a problem, because it used to be at 5 o'clock, you'd leave the workplace and you'd drive home, and what would you do? You'd listen to the radio. You'd decompress from your day. You would go home and actually spend time with your family. Here's what you do now. You leave at 6, right? Because, you know, we're all working less. Technology's really helped us. You leave at 6 and you tell yourself, I'll get a couple more phone calls in on the drive time. It's all hands-free. It's okay. I got a headset. Okay, I'm not dangerous. And so you make a few more calls. What happens to that decompressed time? It doesn't exist anymore. You get home. You make dinner. You help the kids with their homework. Whatever you do. And then you say, I'll just check emails for a couple minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes, by the way, is the pretend time we always use for things that will take 2 hours. Right? It's just 20 minutes. And those of you, a couple of you from Southern California, if you've ever been to Southern California, everything's 20 minutes away. It doesn't matter if it's LA to San Francisco. Oh, it's like 20 minutes. But that's a pretend time we all use. And here's what happens. You get on to answer a couple emails, only take a second, and you find yourself at 1 in the morning still following up. Because we can, we think we should. We have no natural limit to our work where it creeps into our lives and we can't say no. We also have more choices in our society. Men, you think this is a logarithmic table. Ladies, you know exactly what this is. Okay? We have so many choices. Okay? Now, men, if you don't know what this is, I'll explain it to you. Okay? This is the pantyhose sizing chart. Okay? And this is the worst thing ever invented in the history of the world for a man. I have at one point in my life Been at the store at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. Doing this. 3 other guys doing the same thing. We're all confused, okay? So there we are. On the x-axis, you have height. Now, ladies, you must know this is how tall we know you are. We'll be standing there and we'll go, and we'll do a little mental math. Okay, so we got the x-axis down. The y-axis, oh no. Oh no, no, no. Oh no. We don't know what that is. I mean, we barely know what size clothes we wear. There's actually video of guys doing this. Okay. So there you are. We're supposed to guess your weight. Oh, no, no, no. So we're hoping that you're going to land squarely in one of those things. But if it's on the border, because what's worse? Buying the size that's too big? You think I'm this big? Oh my gosh, or buying the size that's too small. I can't fit in these. Okay, I mean, there's no good solution. And then there are all these, so that's just 2 variables. But ladies, you do this to us. Don't ever send a man to do a job only a woman can do. Because then there are all these other choices. I mean, there are colors we've never heard of. Okay, we think ecru. Ladies, you all know what ecru looks like. Men think it's a flightless bird that lives in New Zealand. Okay? So there we are, and there are these colors. Nude is different than tan. They should be the same thing, okay? And so there we are. Oh, no. And then there's another choice. It's February, right? Then there's sandal toe versus reinforced toe. It's like, well, she's probably not going to wear sandals now, but do hose last long enough that she could wear? I don't know. And then there's, she wants you to be supportive. Is that the kind you're supposed to get? She wants you to treat her like a queen. Is that the kind you're supposed to get? Then there's this thing. Now, ladies, men know certain things. We know what XXL looks like, okay? But XXL petite? What? No, we can't do that, okay? So there we are. We're completely beyond our capacity. Okay, we don't know what's going on. By the way, at the end, none of you have to do this, but at the end of one of the talks, a lady walks up to me and she goes, XXL petite, right here. It's in my head now. I won't forget. So now, why am I telling you about pantyhose? The reason I'm telling you about pantyhose is because when you fill your head with 1,000 tiny little choices, it clogs up the work so that it prevents you from making the more important choices. Every decision you make, tiny or large, takes at your decisional load. We have a decisional load each day, a certain kind of top-end number of decisions we can make each day. And if we're filling it with ecru is what? We cannot make the more important decisions. And if we're in the midst of making 1,000 tiny decisions, like when you go to the grocery store, it's like it used to be creamy or chunky peanut butter. And now there's like almond peanut butter and almond honey peanut butter. It's like there's so many choices. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hearkening back to those glory days of the Soviet Union when you could have one kind of thing. What I'm saying is we get so exhausted by so many choices, and all of these choices take a mental toll on us, and it prevents us from doing our work well and prevents us from making good decisions with the ones we love. We may have more change in our work life. How many of you are working less now? Do you remember in the 60s, they said, yeah, with computers and the advent of technology, we will be working 4-day weeks, we'll have 3-day weekends, and we'll all be writing poetry and, playing guitar. How's that work for you? You'll be working 5-hour days, 4 days a week. No, we're working longer now. The average American works more than the average European. No big surprise there. We work more than the French, when you're like, hey, they take all of August off anyway, it doesn't really matter. We work more than the Germans. We work more than the Australians. We work more than the Japanese. We work more than we worked 30 years ago. The average American works 160 hours more a year do the math, 160 hours more a year than they did 30 years ago. That's the equivalent of a work month. We are working more now. How many of you, if you're veterans in this field, how many of you would say your workload has gone down? There's fewer laws. There's fewer people coming to court. It's easier to decide. None of you. You've all seen amped up court hearings, increased caseloads. You've seen more people coming through, more laws, more regulations that you've got to comply with, all of which increases your decisional load. Of course you're tired. Of course you're tired because work life has changed. What are the reactions? All of these reactions create emotional responses. The first of which is anger. When we get this, we become irritable. This is one of my favorite quotes. Anyone can become angry, that's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. I have been angry 6 times in the last 24 hours. I've been angry like this 6 times in my entire life. Information overload will make you grumpy. And we think it's because we work with idiots, okay? And you may. But you're getting worn out. So one response is anger. The other is fear. What's going to happen in the future? I don't know what will happen next. And fear is slightly different than worry. And we can go into it offline. But very quickly, fear is a remarkably adaptive emotion. You know those guys with pickup trucks that say no fear on them? You ever notice they're usually in the ditch? I mean, you ought to have fear of things. Fear of snakes is a very adaptive response. You're hiking in the woods. Oh my gosh, oh gee. You know, fear of heights, yeah, all that's adaptive. What's not adaptive, because fear creates activity. Fight, flight, or freeze. All of which are adaptive responses in certain situations. What you're all dealing with is a kind of fear, which is anticipatory fear or worry. What might happen? Now, I'm not going to do this, but let's say I had a grenade and I pulled the pin, popped the handle, and tossed it in the middle. What would you guys do? Run, okay? Some of you would run. I hope most of you, okay? Some of you would dive on the grenade, okay? So run is the flight response. Dive on the grenade or pick it up and throw it in the corner is a fight response. Some of you might just freeze, okay? And freezing is an adaptive response in some situations. Those are all adaptive responses. Worry is what happens when you think, I wonder if I do the right thing. If you really did that, I might do the wrong thing. Maybe I would freeze and I was too close, or maybe I would run in the wrong direction. And so what we have with worry is you're anticipating what might happen. And you wake up at 3 in the morning, things rolling through your head at 3 in the morning. You can't get them out of your head. You know what you're doing. You're worrying. You're ruminating. You're churning on the same thing and never coming to a productive response. This is one of the consequences of information overload. The next is sadness. People say, you know, I don't cry all the time, so I must not be sad. I get a little frustrated with the widespread use of the word depressed. Depression is a particular diagnosable syndrome, okay? Most of us have transient sadness. We have transient grief, all of which is very normal in the life experience, okay? But if you want the reliable signs of depression, they're sleep impairment. If you're having trouble sleeping, either falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, or waking up early and not being able to fall back asleep, that's the most reliable sign. If you have, that's called insomnia. The converse is true, which is hypersomnia. Hypersomnia is you need 15 hours of sleep, you wake up and you still don't feel rested. So any impairment of your sleep. Second is an appetite or weight disturbance. If you've gained or lost 5% of your body weight in the last 6 months without trying, that's a reliable sign of sadness. Hopelessness about the future. Oh, it's never going to get better. We're going to be living in a van down by the river, okay? Hopelessness about the future. Nothing's ever going to get better. You know, we better stock up on canned goods because it's only, you know, we're going to go to a barter economy. That hopelessness about the future, and then anhedonia. Anhedonia is the loss of pleasure in things that you used to find fun. If you used to like to go to the movies, and it's like, I don't really like that. You used to like to go out to dinner with your friends, it doesn't feel like it. You used to like to have sex with your partner, I don't really feel like it. All of that is anhedonia, which is the loss of pleasure in things that used to be pleasurable. Those are the signs of sadness. And a lot of you are going, that's me. Okay? Now, you can take medicine if you want, which is symptom relief. You've traded out the canary for the condor. Okay? Or you can recognize, I've got a problem here and I can solve it. And it is a solvable problem, but it's going to require some changes in the way you run your life. And if you feel information overloaded and you're angry all the time, or you're worried all the time, or you're sad more than you'd like to be, you can medicate that all you want. Okay? But the real issue is, how do you change the flow of information in your life? Information overload can lead to learned helplessness. Learned helplessness was a concept created by a guy named Martin Seligman, and he found that if you put dogs in an environment where they can't escape, and you shock them in that environment where they can't escape, what he did is he had a box where on half of the box was a shock plate, and on the other half of the box, the dog would jump over this little fence and get to a spot where there wasn't any shock. If you love dogs, you're not going to like this story. And I love dogs, and I don't particularly like this story. But he'd shock it, and the dog would jump to the other side. Now, that's pretty straightforward, okay? What happens when he puts the shock on both sides of the fence? My thought is the dog would jump back and forth, try to balance on the fence. If you're in a situation where you don't believe you can escape, the dog will jump back and forth, realize it can't escape, and then lay down on the shock plate and just take the shock. Now, when Seligman then would put the dogs in another situation where they could escape the shock, so there it is, shock plate, no shock, just over here, no fence, no nothing. The dog, who had learned to be helpless, learned that it couldn't escape its environment, would just stay laying on the shock plate. They actually had to drag the dog off of the shock plate to teach it that it could escape. So once you've been trained that you can't escape, you give up. Now, a lot of you are probably in that give up time right now. There's a lot of changes occurring in your court systems. There's not a lot of money to go around, and you don't have a lot of hope in the future. Oh, it's going to be bad. Okay, it's going to be awful. And you're getting miserable. And so a lot of you are going, I got 6 years. 6 years, and then I'm out. Okay? So you're going to coast for 6 years? You're going to lay down on the shock plate for 6 years? Come on, people. Okay? There is an escape. There's a way to get past this. Okay? And we'll talk about that in the workshop. But you can have learned how to be helpless, and it's a miserable place to be. When we go to the next thing, I'm going to teach you, and I want to spend the next 5 minutes talking about how we make bad decisions. Okay? We used to believe that decision-making, now you've got all this information and you have to make decisions on it. We used to believe that we were rational creatures and that we would make good decisions. The reality is we are inherently self-deceptive people. We are not rational creatures, we're rationalizing creatures. The old decision model was based on this book by Janison Mann, which was the classic decision-making book, and it was a logical decision-making book. A newer book, which is a great read, called How We Decide, by Jonah Lehrer, says that we are not rational decision makers. And so when you're making decisions, you're not making rational decisions. And you're actually making decisions out of the conscious level. He describes an experiment where you give people 3 decks of cards, okay? And by flipping the cards over, you can win money, okay? But one deck of cards is stacked in such a way that you're going to lose money, okay? And so the person is doing this counting task with this deck of cards, and they start losing money. So they start out with $100, and it starts to dwindle down the more they use this deck. They're allowed to switch decks of cards at any particular moment. So they move to another deck, which is kind of even. So on average, that deck of cards will stay even. And then another deck of cards, if you flip the cards over, you start to make money. Okay? And what they find is that if people do this card task long enough, people will drift and gravitate towards the deck that's making them money. But they've got these people hooked up to a heart rate monitor. And fully minutes before they, and they're going back and forth between these decks, kind of trying to figure it out, the heart rate goes up before people decide to go to the other deck. When they start holding the losing deck in their hands, their heart rate goes up minutes before they actually switch reliably to the deck that makes them money. And the takeaway on this is that we know at some sort of pre-conscious level that we're in danger before our brain tells us we're in danger. We've already decided before our pre-conscious, our rational thinking tells us we've decided. If you're excuse me, if you're an expert in your area, you can kind of see trouble coming. Like when a person, if you're dealing with people who are coming into your office and you've been doing this for years, you can pretty much size up right away how this interaction is going to go because you've done it so many times. You're nodding over here. Okay, that's because you have developed a pre-conscious expertise in what's going to happen. So we'll finish with this example. We are not rational creatures. There are two, we have this idea that rational decision making is the best decision making. The reality is our brains don't work this way. So you have two guys. One guy goes to Consumer Reports. He's going to buy a car. So he reads through Consumer Reports and he determines that this car, the Toyota Camry, is the most reliable car. And then he goes out and he goes to 3 other places that rate cars. And they all say a Toyota Camry. And so he calls this insurance company and he says, hey, what's the car that has the lowest insurance rates and the highest fuel economy and the greatest trunk space? And so he finds out what's the best car. And then he searches on the internet and he finds out that blue cars get fewer speeding tickets than any other car. And then he looks and finds out which trim line does he want because he wants to get the greatest value. And so he decides, after doing this rational search, that he's going to get a blue Toyota Camry because it doesn't get as many tickets. Its insurance rates are the least. It's the size of the car that's the most car for the money, and he gets this trim line and it's all good. And so then he writes up a proposal, faxes it to 47 different dealers in a 3-state area and says, here's what I want to pay. If you're in competition with 46 other dealers, if you give me the best price, I'll give you my business. So he faxes them out and he gets bids back and they give him a price. This is a pretty rational way to make a decision, right? This is a logical way to make a decision. Then you've got another guy. And so he gets his blue Toyota Camry, certain trim line, everything. Then you got another guy, he's driving down the street, and he's like, whoa, that's a hot-looking car. He pulls in, he looks at it, I want that car. And the dealer's like, cool, we'll sell it to you. And he goes, I don't know what you give me on this trade-in, and I don't have a lot of money. Can you, how about this amount? And the guy goes, sure. He goes, do you want to drive it? Nope, I'm pretty sure I want it. And all of you are going, well, that's a stupid way to make a decision. But what if these two men got the same car in the end? Okay? We think of the second guy as making an irrational, emotional choice. Actually, he's making an emotional choice. And the emotional choice is, I want to pursue pleasure. And I got the car for the same price, the exact car as Mr. Rational got it. And we think Mr. Rational has made a better decision because he's followed a rational sequence. No, Mr. Rational has made an emotional decision. The emotion that he's trying to deal with is regret. He's trying to avoid regret. So he goes through all this decision process to avoid future regret. Does that make sense? They're both emotional decisions. Okay? And you're going to deal with people in those ways. So, here's what I want to leave you with. Number 1, you are not rational creatures. You are rationalizing creatures. Number 2, the stress that you're feeling in your life, you are not alone. And most of the stress you're feeling in your life is related to information overload as it relates to your work and your life. When we go to the workshop, I'll tell you how to overcome it and how it affects in reliable, predictable ways the way you make decisions. And you'll find that you're making bad decisions over and over and over again in predictable ways because you're trying to consume too much information. It is 10 o'clock. Thank you for your time. God bless.